Evening, members and officers. It's 6:30 and welcome to we haven't turned that on, have I? The fire exit is located at the side of this room. Exit through reception and meet in a War Memorial Park. Webcast of this meeting. This meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. Microphones. Please can I remind members and officers that in order to be heard clearly within the room by those present and on the webcast, that you must speak directly into the microphone. The microphone stem can be moved so it can be close to your mouth as possible. And mobile phones, please switch off or turn to silent. Thank you, that's the housekeeping. Get on to the meaty stuff, eh? Apologies for absence and substitutions. I don't think we have any. No, good. Any declarations of interest? No. Urgent items or matters, I should say? No. Minutes of the meeting held, or meetings, I should say, on the 7th and 28th of September. The minutes will be on the 2nd of November. Is that okay with members? Yeah. And then we go on to the substantial paper for tonight, which is Item 5, options for delivery of housing in the borough. I would like to sort of play this first. If Laura, you could just give us a sort of foreword, and then we can move into the agenda bit after.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This report has been produced because of the motion that Councillor Slimming brought forward to full council back in 2022, and thank you for doing so. And since then, we've had a new administration, and we've made it a very clear one that a key priority is the delivery of affordable homes, with a focus on the delivery of socially rented accommodation. We've inherited a reducing pipeline of affordable housing and an increasing housing register. There is a target to deliver 300 homes per year in our current local plan and housing strategy. The inherited pipeline over the next 2 years falls short of this target, and this target is dependent on us delivering many down. The report sets out our housing need and demand for affordable housing. It also demonstrates the need to prioritise socially rented housing as the preferred housing tenure. A socially rented housing tenure is let at 50% of market rent. The report concludes that the quickest and most effective way to deliver additional affordable housings would be on council-owned land, or there is the possible option of land owned by registered housing providers, the county, other public sector bodies, or private landowners who were willing to enter into an agreement. We have started to map the land ownership across the borough, and this will be a comprehensive process, looking at short, medium and long-term opportunities. Our focus initially will be on those short-term sites and how quickly we can deliver additional homes. We will work closely with those ward members. If members would like to discuss possible opportunities you may have to deliver affordable homes within your wards, we're very happy to talk to you. Section 3 of the report on page 12 and 18 sets out the possible delivery options for the delivery of affordable housing. Our conclusion is there may be a range of models and options we pursue. Doing nothing isn't an option, and we need to take a site-by-site approach. Nothing is ruled out. In concluding, we need to drive up the delivery of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Any members like to ask any clarification or anything? You're happy to move on to the main item? Yeah. Right, thinking that maybe we can do the main considerations first from section 1 to 2.21, and then we can go on to, that's on to page 5, and then we can go on to the conclusions of the research, and then we can go on to the appendices as the third item. So if we kick off on page 6 and 7, if anybody members want to ask questions or kick the debate off on the purpose of the report and the executive summary. John?
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, if we start though with the question of needs and supply, it's good the report says that the council has a current affordable homes target of 300 new homes per annum and has delivered an average of 306 affordable homes per annum over the last 7 years, and that is significantly better than all Hampshire local authorities and other local authorities, similar local authorities. Clearly, with what's been going on with the rise in interest rates, the COVID, and the war in Ukraine, one would expect some falling off in the delivery of affordable housing. But I suppose a question really for Kate. I think generally speaking, we've been pretty successful in delivering affordable homes in this borough over the last 6 or 7 years.
Yes. We've delivered in excess of our target. I think that the point that the paper is highlighting is that what's going to happen in the future, and it's good to get ahead of the curve in terms of looking at future pipeline delivery, and I think that's really what the essence of the paper is around. Can we continue to rely, as we have done previously, on primarily the planning system delivering most of the affordable housing that we need, with a few additional sort of exemplar schemes where we've had some involvement, and I think the clear evidence here is that no, that there is a justification if you choose to accept that justification in actually taking an intervention in the market, and therefore what could that intervention be? The very specific sort of remit of the motion was, should we become a council house builder? I mean, I've got the motion here in terms of please produce us a report on how we can bring forward proposals to become a council house builder. I think what comes out of the report is that that's neither as simple, as straightforward, as cost effective as it might seem, so therefore what other options are available. So that's a very long-winded way of saying yes, but we need to do something different in the future.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying, and of course we need to look at what we can do in future to improve the delivery of affordable housing for our residents. I have to say that looking at the recommendations in the report, I'm not convinced that the changes that are proposed are going to make that much difference to it, and it would take, I think, quite a long time for those changes to have any effect. But that's for later on, I suspect. Can we just turn now to the question of demand, because I think we've got a pretty good track record as a housing authority in getting people who are on the housing list into housing, and I think it's something probably in the order of 25% of those on the housing list in any one year are found new housing by this council, and I'm very proud of our record over many years as a council in the way that we've helped people that in need get on to the housing. Is that an accurate reflection of our performance?
I think that's fair comment again. The issue is that waiting times on the housing register were decreasing. the numbers on that we had a couple of years when we had more delivery than we had people joining the register, so the register increased at a lower rate than the increase in properties that we were getting through. But we can't move away from the fact that situation has changed. I think it would be ignoring a lot of very clear signals if we were to stick our heads in the sand and say we might be in a dip and we might come out the other side, simply because of the changes in the housing market, changes in demand, supply, etc., etc. So I think, yours is a fair point. That's where we were. This is where we are moving forward, and that's why the report spends some time actually sort of dealing with the comment in the motion. We're facing a housing crisis. What does that look like? And so the information we've put in there is to deal with that. Crisis. The term crisis is a subjective term, isn't it? So, but it's about here's the raw data, and here's where we're likely to be going in the future.
Can I just come in there as well? And if you look at on page 5 of 18, in relation to that table, in relation to the register applicants, you can clearly see the trend. In relation to 2021-22, there's a dip, but that relates to COVID, and that relates to some work that was done just after COVID, and that wasn't that we housed those people, that those people were taken off of the register. So that's why there's a dip there. But you can see from that trajectory that it's going up as a continuous. So there is an unmet need in relation to demand, and that has been a steady trend up since 2000 on this table in 2016.
But would it be fair to say that of the 4,000 or so residents who are on the housing list, we are generally speaking each year able to meet and provide housing for those who qualify, who are most in need in terms of the criteria that we are seeking to meet?
I think if you asked me that today, I would say that's in some doubt, simply because of the pressures coming onto the housing register. For example, I think this week is slightly different, but for the last 4 weeks in a row, we had no 3-bed properties come up for social letting, and that to me is unprecedented in a long period of time, apart from sort of during COVID. So that's really where the supply side has been sort of been silting up, if you like. The other element to consider is how much of the new development has come through at affordable rent rather than social rent. That's another dimension that we've been looking at, because now, as a result of changes in the welfare system, the gap between what's affordable on an affordable rent and what can be supported through the welfare system is much bigger than it was, say, 5 or 6 years ago. So I think it's just about keeping a very fluid overview of what's happening in the housing market and being proactive and flexible and ready to take action.
Thank you. Sven?
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick question, if I may. At the bottom of page 3 of 18, or page 7, however you like to define it, delivering a small programme of new affordable homes up to 200, i.e. 199. If one were to take that road, once you, as it were, dealt with 199, can you then repeat that process and still not have to go for an HRA and do another 199? Or is that literally a one-off thing which cannot be repeated? Thank you.
I think it's a nice try, but it's unlikely. I mean, I think it's quite a fluid thing that you would require Secretary of State approval, etc., etc. But if you are generally in the business of developing a new housing stock and you're looking to project massively over 200, the requirement would be to open an HRA.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, Chair. So looking at the analysis that talks about short-term, medium-term and long-term on page 4, and this segues into really to what John was saying, where I certainly recognise the hard work this council has put in. I think it was last year, the year before, we were the second highest delivering authority in the south of England for affordable housing. So certainly it has been a priority that we have been trying to take action on that. What I'm interested in, though, is this report talks about potential long timeline for direct council delivery. So how might this initiative realistically improve the housing crisis in the short to medium term?
I think it's a numbers game, isn't it, in the very short term? We're looking at a pipeline for this year of delivery around about 220, 230. So, you know, if any in that context, anything extra will help. Delivery is only one part of a very big jigsaw in terms of addressing housing needs. Homelessness prevention also counts towards that. So all of the additional work that we're doing, which doesn't necessarily touch new delivery, so things like advice to prevent homelessness, freeing up the private rented sector as much as we can by working with private landlords, all of that work will help deal with those immediate pressing needs. So we have to keep, which is why we've got the housing strategy, which takes that sort of broad approach, our eye on all the possible avenues for addressing housing needs. If we think we're going to build and deliver our way out of a housing crisis or a housing shortage, we won't. But at the same time, it's also a fundamental part of enabling us to prevent homelessness.
I also pick up on that in relation to that model, that option that you're talking about. That is a longer term option, and you know, if we're wanting to look at the quicker wins, then it's the enhanced model that will give us those shorter term wins. But that is, and in relation to the options on page 12 or 13, in relation to the building of council housing, then that means that we're going to, you know, that's the 2-year lead-in period. But we also need quantum of development to be able to do that.
Okay, just a quick one to come back on that. So it's fairly safe to say that in the short term, it's not actually the delivery of the council housing, it's actions that would be taken anyway as part of the strategy that we're going through. It's not necessarily the delivery or build out.
I don't think I said that. I think it's a contributory part. It's important that we do a number of things to address the shortage. One thing on its own isn't going to bring us the answer. So it's the fact that we are sort of open for business on all aspects in terms of the work we do to prevent homelessness and to stimulate sort of new delivery. And other examples where we've brought properties back into use and used them as supported housing, for example. There's a whole plethora of things that we've done in recent years and still have a mind to do in terms of seizing any opportunity that becomes available.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things, if I may. The rising need. Obviously, we got immigration at 600,000 last year, and that was legal immigration. Now, obviously, we've got 3 hotels here that are full of migrants. I'd just like to understand, are you suspecting that we will get a delivery of more need as a borough council, or do you not see that happening? You think it'll all be dispersed throughout the country? So.
Can I invite you to attend the members' session next week on asylum and immigration, which will capture some of that. But yeah, very important, because in terms of immigration and asylum seekers, there are hotels in the area, but until that settled status is given, they're not eligible in any sense for housing. So in that, there's not an immediate need that's presenting. As soon as that settled status is granted, potentially it could create needs. So this is, but this is something, it would probably be wrong to deal with that here until we've gone through the detailed work when we can present you the evidence of what's happening, because we've got 2 hotels that are currently in operation now, because the Afghan hotel was wound up, which was great. So yes, potentially, I mean, newly arising need arises for a number of reasons, one of which might be migrating households, but it's part of a whole number of things. We took a really detailed report to scrutiny 2 weeks ago, I think it was, which has also our annual housing allocations review. So all of that needs evidence is there, and we can put the link in the minutes for you to sort of follow that through.
Thank you for that. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. Well, obviously, I'm very pleased to see this paper eventually come forward, because it was my motion in December, and we did hope that it would come in 6 months, but obviously the administration has changed, and things have perhaps got a bit delayed. However, I don't think that should hold us up, and we need to move forward. There's one or two points that have been raised. We keep talking about affordable homes, and yes, your record, which was ad infinitum told us in December, is very good. But affordable is a very subjective point of view at the moment, because most people cannot afford what is classed as an affordable home. In fact, a lot of people can't afford social homes, social rent homes at the moment, because the cost of living crisis has actually determined that a lot of people can't afford to live. There was an article in the paper this week that said that there's more stress caused by higher rents than there is by losing your job, which is quite a significant fact, that people are struggling. Now, people haven't just been struggling with rents, they've been struggling for a long while, because the rental market has obviously not increased. Mortgage rates going up has not helped that. So people who are now trying to find somewhere to rent can't afford it. People who are trying to get on the ladder can't afford it, because somebody crashed the economy, and we've got mortgage rates going out of the roof. So it's getting more and more difficult for people to actually find anywhere to live. You all know that I'm involved in citizens' advice, and Ken has now joined us on the board, and we will be getting a report about the way that things are getting worse. That families with two people working and could be on universal credit, because you get universal credit even if you're working. In fact, to what most people would consider quite a reasonable salary, you're still eligible for universal credit. But it doesn't entitle you to be able to afford a mortgage or a rent. And as said in the paper, the amount of money that you get as a benefit towards your housing doesn't actually pay a great deal towards the cost of housing, particularly in the south of England, and particularly in Basingstoke and Dean. We are not unique. I dispute the fact that we have done fairly well, really, when you've got nearly 5,000 people on the waiting list. And the figures that I gave at December haven't changed a great deal about the breakup of what that's divided into. I had the opportunity to speak to some people from Portsmouth recently. Portsmouth, as you may know, has got quite a restricted area where they can build. So obviously they have had to look very carefully at where they can build their houses. They have got a population of 2,010 people. They had a waiting list of 2,000 people. We have got a population of 185,000, and we have got a waiting list of approaching 5,000. I think it is time that we try to address that as quickly as possible. Every person that is sitting waiting for a home is somebody that is in need in our borough, and I think we need to move forward as quickly as possible. Now, I know there's lots of alternatives, and I never thought it was going to be easy, and that's why I recommended the paper that the Institute have done, and I did speak to somebody about that. They've got more and more evidence coming forward about the need and the opportunities. And I would ask the officer if they would consider one other possible opportunity. You will all know that Tadley can't have any houses built in Tadley itself, because we have the DEPZ, which restricts all housing. However, I just wonder if we could look at whether we could buy some existing properties for other people who want particularly to stay in Tadley. Perhaps some of the elderly residents who'd like to leave a 3-bedroomed or 4-bedroomed house that they're now rattling round with on their own because they've lost their partners and their children have left home, that we could actually perhaps find some bungalows for people to downsize into that we could buy, or that some other 3-bedroomed homes that might be on the market. I have noticed recently that houses used to go within seconds of the board going up, and all of a sudden there are a lot more boards hanging about. So housing is not as popular as it was because people can't raise the money. So could that be added as an option?
Thank you. Kate?
They're called existing satisfactory purchases schemes, ESP, and we have run successful ESP programs before. We've done that with Vivid, who went out and bought properties which we subsequently used to address homelessness. Most of those are in the town. It's not something that you'd necessarily rule out, but to suggest that that is a panacea really for a situation, I think which it couldn't be. Buying second-hand properties is not a cheap option in terms of the amount of grant that it takes to acquire those properties and for it to become affordable. Registered providers aren't necessarily keen in having a pepper-potted stock of properties that are non-traditional in terms of the maintenance and repair and those sort of things. And so it can be quite problematic, and also you need to be very careful of not sucking all of the potential properties for other potential purchasers out of the market because you're coming along with sort of oven-ready finance, if you like. So that's there's a yes and no to every single answer, to every single issue on housing and homelessness and addressing housing need. Wouldn't rule it out, but don't think it can be a panacea. But and thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you. I wasn't suggesting it was a panacea. I was basically suggesting that we do have a particular problem in the Tadley area because it's within the DEPZ, and so even if we would wish to have some, I know there are a couple of very small sites in the town that have been suggested come forward, but they've all been stopped because of the fact that they won't be allowed by the rules that are currently applying. So I just wondered if we could look at whether or not there might be some small opportunities. I am aware of quite a lot of houses in my area which have been bought by different housing associations than Vivid or Sovereign, one-off properties that have come on the market and people have bought them up in the past. So we have got some of those houses in the town. It might be just a small opportunity to provide something locally for those people who would like to stay within the area, and it would be part of the bigger mix, which I appreciate. You can't deliver everything at once, but certainly I would urge them, whatever we do, let's get on with it. Let's get regular reports and let's make sure that we can deliver something as soon as possible so that at least some people will get back on the housing ladder as soon as possible.
Thank you.
I think that like Kate said, I wouldn't rule it out, and I think that there may be something that we could do, but like Kate said also that it's going to take a massive amount of capital grant to deliver that. But it also may be an option for an area like Tadley that we might consider something like that, and in relation to downsizing. So we might look at, if we were to gain additional units where people that are existing housing stock could move into a smaller unit, and but it's something that we could explore, and I think it's something that we can consider as part of one of the options.
Thank you. Chloe?
Thank you. I'm delighted to see this paper. I only wish we'd have seen it 4 or 5 years ago, because we may well have been moved on from these short-term objectives and not be in the situation that we're facing today. There are a lot of councillors here. Joe was successful in bringing this motion forward, but there have been a lot of councillors over the time that have been really pushing for this. So this is better late than never, and we have to start somewhere. Our performance against other local authorities may well appear to be very good, but if you're a resident of this borough, it really makes no difference how we perform against other local authorities, or indeed how well we've performed over the last 5 years. So I really hope tonight is about looking forward at this paper and what it's aiming to do. 4,000, 5,000 is a huge amount of people, families. Even if 25% of them manage to get a house this year, that's 75% that don't. I get a lot of casework around this. There'll be some here that get an awful lot more than I do, and I get personally invested in that. I very regularly log on to HomeBid, and I suggest that other councillors do, because if you're somebody that's waiting for a home and you stay up till midnight on Wednesday, Thursday, just to log in to then see that there's 10 properties that you've got to bid on against 4,000 other individuals and households. I urge everybody to sit here tonight and look at this paper and think forward and not backwards. And that's just a plea really to how I'd like to see us take this forward this evening.
Thank you, Chloe. John?
Thank you, Gary. I just want to ask a question about around the distinction between social rented and affordable rented. Social rented being a lower rental charge. In here, we're saying that a lot of the residents who are on universal credit wouldn't be able to afford the average weekly affordable rent. But I'm slightly confused by the table, which seems to indicate that the local housing allowance is actually higher than the average weekly affordable rent in 3 out of the 4 cases, i.e. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, and it's well over, in fact. So, yeah, yes, please do. Yes.
Really glad you asked that question, because the reason why the viewpoint on affordable rents have changed is it's not necessarily the starting point where you have the disparity between local housing allowance and rent. It's the way that things increase over time. So rents will go up RPI plus 1%, whatever it is, every year with inflation. Local housing allowance has been frozen for the last 3-4 years, so that local housing allowance stays the same. So if somebody goes into a property that is within local housing allowance, and it doesn't necessarily mean, it just so happens that the properties that we've had come forward have been lower than local housing allowance rates, because we've been quite strict with the registered providers about charging that. But the problems that we have and now foresee is that over time, someone's tenancy, eventually their rent will exceed local housing allowance. Now, what registered providers have said to us is that they'll recalibrate that after, the minute it starts going above local housing allowance, when the tenancy starts again. And we're like, so does that mean that somebody has to be evicted in order for it to be a new tenancy and start again at below the local housing allowance rate? So with apologies for the length and the technical detail behind that answer, it's the changing welfare provisions over time. So when we started off with the current local plan that was silent on the difference between affordable rent and social rent, that was quite justifiably because the welfare provisions sufficiently enabled that rent to be afforded. It's as it's been frozen over time with the local housing allowance that's made that impact, and we now have situations where people cannot afford those rents, and particularly as well if only if people are working and able to afford sort of those higher levels of rent, it does keep a lot of people from being able to afford those. So it's something that's evolved over time as a result of national policy.
I think I'm right in saying that over 80% of affordable housing in this country is delivered by registered providers, i.e. housing associations. They are experts. They develop. They know what they're doing. They're well funded. Their whole raison d'etre is to build houses. I'm not quite clear what it is that we think that we're going to be able to add to the party through this paper that is actually going to make any difference and will be particularly welcome to them. I'm sure they'd like a good relationship with the council. I think they probably have a good relationship, and it's not to say it can't be improved. But I just wonder if you could respond on that point.
I think on the whole, for our 2 major providers, that is the case, Sovereign and Vivid. In Basingstoke and Dean, we have over 20 registered providers. I have to say that a lot of them don't really have much regard to what the particular local view of Basingstoke and Dean Council might be, particularly in terms of potential standards or setting sort of the direction of travel in terms of what we want to be delivered. That reflects how the registered provider movement has changed over the years. So they've merged, they've become sub-regional, then sub-national. So actually how responsive they are to the local needs, I think was one of the motivations behind the motion, in terms of us being able to have greater control and steer in that. So there is something that can be done with enabling, and we do that, I think, very successfully, particularly with Sovereign and Vivid. Our ability to do that with other registered providers, and a number of councillors around the table have come to me with casework, particularly with some of the smaller providers in Basingstoke and Dean, real issues around contactability, responsiveness, etc., etc. So I think, on the whole, in terms of delivering, registered providers are up there. They've got the money from Homes England ready to roll because they're strategic partners, etc., etc. But the paper does sort of give some evidence to suggest that there are reasons, if you choose to accept them, for actually intervening and becoming more involved. That's not to say that you would take over and become the main social housing provider. There's 13,000 social housing units in Basingstoke and Dean. Even if Basingstoke were to start building tomorrow, it would take decades to get to that level. So I think, on balance, I think it's a fair comment that there is some space to have that intervention.
One more question. I think I'm right in saying that the residents who find it most difficult who are on the housing list to get accommodation are single people. 2,400 in March 2022 out of over 4,000. So there's no reference to them in the report, which is disappointing. I just wonder if there's anything that we think could be done to help that very substantial part of a number of our residents who presumably are stuck on the housing list because there isn't the accommodation for them.
I mean, the housing needs on the register, yes, in terms of volume, it's single people. In terms of length of wait and numbers of applicants per vacancy becoming available, it's actually larger families, so it depends which way you sort of want to look at that. A lot of the paper was just looking at the strategic picture in terms of the justification for an intervention, rather than saying, and if you're going to do this, this should be the target, that should be the target. It will depend on the location, it will depend on the characteristics of the site, but any proposal, because it would need to have a thorough and evidenced examination of need, and the need that would be addressed through that scheme, which will be different in different locations. As I say, there are a range of things that we're attempting to do to meet that huge gap between demand and supply, particularly for single people, encouraging the development of well-managed HMOs, and we've had some success with doing that. But yeah, the numbers are very, very challenging, and there's no easy answer to that. But yes, hopefully, with some of the enhanced enabling, it's been clear for years that single people is the largest volume of unmet need on our housing register.
If I can also, I mean, in relation to that, and I think it would be really important I think if you can all read the report that went to scrutiny on the housing allocation, it will give you some real detail to what is on the register and what it looks like. I think, and if you have any questions, come back to us, and for those people that weren't part of scrutiny. But in relation to that cohort of single people that are on the register, there's an assumption that they're young single people. That's not the reality. Is that quite a lot of those people are 35 to 55 and above. So it's a real range of age groups. But it's not to say, in relation to the options that we're looking at tonight, that those options aren't going to accommodate young people, single people. But the other issue, and Kate touched on that, is those people on the register who need a 3 or a 5 bedroom unit of accommodation. And I think there's something like an 8-year wait for that. Sorry? For 4 beds. Yeah, for 4 beds. And so, if we were to look at an enabling role, there is the opportunity for us to actually develop some of that larger accommodation that will help those people. But we're not saying in this report what accommodation that we would deliver. It's that we're going to try to deliver additional affordable housing. What that might look like will be something that we need to look at, and in relation to what grant funding we can get.
Thank you. Abdul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, first, I would like to start with acknowledging the efforts that you've put into this. I'm really glad to see that we're trying to work out a very clear strategy to address the existing and the rising issue around housing. Just a comment, a suggestion on the delivery model options table at the end. I found it very useful to see the benefits, disadvantage. But one thing is, I would very much willing to see it here is the timeline, as in the lead time for each of these model until it's actually full functioning and delivering, because the time is the essence here. So some of these might need 2-3 years until they are actually starting to deliver housing, but then that perhaps they have a better benefit and much more sustainable than something that will be set up in a shorter term. So I think having that for each of the model will help very much to know which way would be more beneficiary for the borough. Thank you.
I think that's a fair point. In relation to the in-house delivery model, I mean, to set up a housing registered account, it's a 2-year process. So that shows you in relation to that would be in relation to the longer term delivery of affordable housing. So in relation to the mapping that we're doing, we're looking short, medium and long term. So if we were wanting to do that route, we would need to be looking at the longer term and looking at sites, more complex sites that would meet that area. But in relation to the enhanced model, what would, and I think we can do that for you, is to give you that information. But in relation to that, the mapping that we're doing at the moment, we're looking at short, medium and long term. And obviously our priority at the moment is to focus on the short term and what can we deliver. We've got a shortfall in our target to deliver affordable housing this year, and looks like it will be next year as well in relation to the pipeline that we've got. So we've got to put as much effort as we can into looking at every option here within this paper, and I think it's about looking at a site-by-site process so that the site is there and which model suits that site. So it's not saying we're going to do this one or that one, and it's actually looking at the site that we have and which option would best suit that delivery of affordable housing, and how best can we do that. And I think that's how we're going to take it as an approach, that we will do it on a site-by-site basis. But obviously the shorter term is that we've really got to put some effort in to get those through. The more complex in relation to the longer term options, they're really complex sites and they're going to take a lot of work. But then that's where we might want to consider an in-house option there.
Thank you. That's helpful to know, actually, to get my head around about each model could be applied, or different model could be applied to different sites. But just again, as a comment here or reservation on this, is because some of these models will take, and as I can see from the comparison, a lot of time, efforts, resources to get them set up. So perhaps we need to look very strategically about which of these models that will be more applicable to more sites to opt for, opposed to wait for each piece of land and kind of try to deploy different models that will take up quite a lot of resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron?
When I look at this paper and I look at affordable, I think of social. The difference in the rent levels means that what's affordable in your assessment and my assessment will differ, and that's normal. So for me, affordable is a misnomer because of the difference between the social and the private rented markets. And certainly, if you're one of those 5,000 on our needs list, the horizon seems a long way away. It doesn't look rosy. So
whilst I welcome this paper, I'm a little bit disappointed because I want to support intervention. I want to do what little we can and get started sooner rather than later. Following this report, there's going to be more investigation, more analysis, more decision making, and we've still not laid a brick anywhere. So I would like to know, is it feasible for us to fast track a couple of small pilot schemes with the two leading registered providers with an objective of learning lessons, because it's a different way of working with our partners. The legal issues, there's a lot to learn. And from that exercise, I think that would feed well into other models which we're working on and developing in parallel to a pilot. Can that approach be adopted?
I think that approach is already in train. I mean, we have, the paper does refer to some examples that have taken place where we have done that. I think as officer, it's very clear to me that there appears to be consensus around the importance and the need for affordable housing delivery, and that is great because there's a mandate there to to progress affordable housing, and we will do that at pace. It's not easy, and it also relies on the equivalent input of other parties because we're not in control of everything. But it's great to be in a position where the mandate and the strategic steer that we have is to go forth, do, deliver, apply. And that will be different models in different areas, but we are doing that, and I can look to my colleague at the end of the table. This has been consuming our sort of working life for the last sort of 6 months or so as we've tried to sort of sketch how we progress this forward. So that is very clear that is a priority that we're working to. Affordable housing has, I think, always had in this council a degree of consensus around it in terms of its importance. So yeah, I think it's in train. There's nothing to say it's going to stop. And yes, of course, it's how we do something, review it and learn to do it better and do it different and adapt and flex. So yes, thank you.
Yep,
in terms of sort of pilots or fast tracking, and you say things are already in motion, if that's the case, haven't we got timescales, indicative timescales of what can be delivered when?
That's coming. I mean, we spent a lot of time sort of going through all the analysis and the learning curve that we'd sent, but we have already started on the site mapping and the potential for sort of that work has been happening this very week even. I couldn't say by Christmas we'll have our first property, by Easter, whatever, but we will refine that into a business plan as we progress through this work. It's just a work in motion, and all this report represents is a reflection of where we are at this point in time.
Can I come in as well? I mean, in relation to this paper, this isn't going to be a panacea in relation to resolve all the issues in relation to housing need. We've got what we've got in the pipeline that's coming through. This is looking at our own sites, and a lot of those sites are going to be very complicated to deliver. They're not going to be easy. There'll be ones that are easier to deliver, and we will have quicker wins. We're not going to have those before Christmas, but we're hoping that they come forward much quicker. So when we're mapping, we're going to look at short, medium and long term, the short being those that are going to be easier for us to achieve. We need to be mindful as also, in relation to this paper, we've got South Manydown coming forward, so, that's on the horizon, isn't it, in relation to any future development. So that needs to be considered in relation to this. But in relation to the paper, I mean, the enhanced partnership is the quickest model to deliver affordable housing, really. There may be other options, and we're talking to smaller housing associations as well at the moment. We're looking at lots of different options. But in relation to that, and in relation to the amount of money that the two housing associations have, Sovereign and Vivid, in relation to the paper, they've got £273 million available in grant funding And we will be mad not to make use of that. And if we've got land that we can use and we can bring forward as quickly as we can, and they've got grant, it's about a marriage and how we can work together, and how we can bring that forward. But all of these are going to take work. But as Kate said, we've had meetings this week. We've got another one tomorrow and another one next week in relation to this. It's an absolute key priority of this administration to deliver a higher number of affordable, or worse saying, socially rented units of accommodation. Some of that will be affordable, and that will be a whole range of different affordable units within that. But it's a priority. But I can't tell you how quickly we can do that, but there's a commitment to do that. And at the same time, we've got all of that that's coming through the planning process, which is in the pipeline. But we just need to warn you that that pipeline is drying up, and I've inherited a pipeline that has a reduced number of units coming forward. So this year, we're not going to deliver what the local plan, your local plan, said we're meant to deliver, which is 300 units. That's not going to be achieved because the AMR is, when does that close? What's the? You get that in January. So it's unlikely that we will deliver that. So there will be a shortfall, and that's sad in relation to the people that are on the register. That's drastic. There's 5,000 people, but those people who are in housing need, are sitting there waiting for accommodation. And like we said, some of them, those families have been sitting there for 8 years. And if you've got, if you're a family needing a 5-bedroom or a 4-bedroom unit, and you're on there, and you know that your waiting time is 8 years, well, that's hell, isn't it? Absolutely hell.
Thank you for that, David.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of clarifications for my question. Councillor Sullivan mentioned Portsmouth. I know Portsmouth very well. Outside of London, Portsmouth, the most densely populated city in the UK, and 13th most densely populated city in Europe. So I certainly hope that isn't a yardstick that we'd be looking to replicate as part of this work that we're doing. Picking up on Kate's point about the consensus in the room for affordable housing, I think there absolutely is a consensus in the room for affordable housing, certainly on this side as well as that side. And to pick up on what Councillor Hussey said as well, affordable housing is absolutely subjective, so it needs to be affordable to the people that need the house. Now, whether or not that's socially affordable rent, it's semantics, I think. Where the difference lies is in the delivery of that affordable housing, and I still don't think there's a consensus on that, certainly not from my point yet. I still have a number of questions that I think I would need to be addressed before I'm comfortable with this. And so that leads into my question now, because we're obviously talking about the different delivery methods, and there is a lot of risk involved in some of these methods that we pick up. So what I want to understand, because what I never saw in the report was any talk about financial risk to ongoing revenue. So how will we anticipate, budget for and manage long-term revenue implications when we become the house builder, when we become responsible for maintenance, for building compliance? Councillor Ibram's ward, you see the issues there with the cladding that comes on. You've got the new fire safety regulations, you've got the new standards set by the regulator of social housing. I don't see any of that in this report, and I think that's something that absolutely needs to be considered before we even sat and thought about we could go down that route. Thank you.
I don't think this report is recommending that. This report is saying there are a number of options, and in fact, if that was the only option, it would probably be a different report. If the objective is around expediting affordable housing delivery, which meets needs and enables us to influence the standard, quality, quantity, price, etc., then there are routes to go down which will enable that in different ways. I think all of the items that you've mentioned would require an in-depth appraisal, and that's why, rather than sort of becoming fixated on a particular delivery model as opposed to the outcome, would be unfortunate. It's not for us officers to say which way the council chooses to take itself, but our advice is around actually, if that's the objective, these are the more expeditious ways of delivering that.
quickie.
Yeah, I absolutely get what you're saying, but to get to the outcome, you have to have chosen methods to deliver that, and I think that's the point of what I'm saying, and that's the important bit, that we need to fully understand all the risks involved, because I think we all agree the outcome that we want to achieve.
If we were to go down the in-house model, I would assume that we would have to come forward with, or you can choose to bring a paper forward as a committee, and we would want to, for you to have your views on that. And we would obviously have to present all the issues that you're relating to. But as it says in the paper, that if we were wanting that route, that's a 18-month, 2-year lead-in period. So the time off for that, and so that in relation to the short term isn't going to be an option that we're looking at. And what we're saying in relation to, we don't want to be tied to any model at this stage. We want to look at each site and how best can we deliver affordable housing. We need to be really flexible, and if the game is to get as many affordable housing units as possible, we need to have that flexible approach. And this is what that paper is saying, that we're going to take a site-by-site approach to this. In the future, if we want to do an in-house model, we need quantum if we're wanting, to deliver that model. So, to actually make that stack up, we would need quantum to deliver that.
Thank you. Ken?
Thank you. As I discussed with Kate earlier on, this is an options paper, and I think it would have been helpful had we had either housing associations here or developers, when we could have questioned them how they think quicker delivery could be brought through. And I'm just laying it out there. But to give you some good news, Kingsclere neighbourhood plan did have 3 sites in the neighbourhood plan, none of which have been delivered yet, and one of them was just for social housing. So I wonder if it is possible that you get in touch with the Guinness Trust and ask them if we could deliver that site more quickly, because that is not a big site. It's be 15 houses, but I do think it's next to our social housing in Longcross and Stokens. So I think it is an easily deliverable site, and I think it is important that we get exemplars and give these people a shove to say what we'd like to be delivered in our communities. All right, this is helpful.
Thank you. I'm going to agree with Councillor Rushing on what just said. We do need to have some exemplars to show what we can do and how quick we can, and maybe in the future meetings that we can bring the housing associations in to have conversations with them, which I'm sure is on some of the agendas moving forward anyway, and maybe not with this committee, but with others, to actually look at how we work with housing associations. I make a couple of comments about finance. There is mention in the paper about the way that we would have to move forward and develop if we were to go along certain routes. It talks about having to get more resources, more people, borrowing money, and the way that might happen. One of the things I just want to clarify with the officer, I'm sure that they will, is that I read in the paper that obviously we're not eligible for certain rates of interest, and I believe that is because we have too much money in the bank. I believe that is the case, and maybe that can be clarified. So over the years, I'm going to quote you something that I said when we moved the motion in December last year. I said, we need to get affordable houses for our residents, as we did before 93, 94, when we agreed to sell our housing stock to 2 housing associations, and that was finalised in 1995. After paying off any debts, we got £65 million net from that sale. 10 million was used in 1996 to secure land at Manydown. Well, that was so that we could build more houses, but we know where that is. And future development. And not a home has been delivered there yet. And 2 million was granted to housing associations so that they could actually build some homes. That money, when I asked the question in December last year as to where the £65 million less the amount that we did allocate had gone to, and in fact it went into capital receipts, I believe, and we have spent it over the years, not on more housing, but on other things that we have provided in the borough. I think this time we need to seriously think whether we should be putting our money where our mouth is and actually providing the cash so that we can deliver, along with any method of raising money and using other housing associations' money that's there, because I think we owe it to our residents. We've ignored the housing issue since 1993 when we decided to sell off our housing. I believe that we owe people that way forward, and I think money is something that is going to come into thing in the future, and I know that Councillor Miller in the scrutiny is quite interested in looking at the risk and the finances in the future, so that needs to come to that committee as well.
Thank you. Kate?
On the first question around interest preferential rates, I haven't got a clue. I will defer back to my finance colleagues who will be able to give a written answer to that if I may. On the issue of stock transfer, it's an interesting one, because one of the I wasn't working at the council when stock transfer sort of proceeded, but there were many reasons why stock transfer was a beneficial option at the time, and one of those is that the local authority then became able to give further grants to housing associations to build and reclaim that money back from government. It's called local authority social housing grants, so the money sort of sits in a pot and then sort of recycles itself. Now, times have changed, but just to offer some consolation, there was a lot of activity that happened to address housing needs on the back of that stock transfer decision. So it was almost 30 years ago, and we are where we are. But stock transfer, it happened for a reason. It had a rationale, and we are where we are. But I will also, as I say, get you that answer on the finance from my colleagues.
Thank you, Kate.
On the point in relation to risk, so in page 20 it talks about risk management, and it says, should the council wish to progress any option, a more detailed risk assessment and management plan would be required. So it's very clear within the report that we've identified that.
You, Kate and Laura. I remember those days when we could recycle the money, and the government at the time closed the loophole down, didn't it? So there you go. Sarah, you wanted to make a point.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the access of public work loan or borrowing point, and again, we will follow that up with finance colleagues, but my understanding is because this council has a significant investment portfolio, it can't access public work loan boards, which the government obviously gives local authorities the chance to access at slightly preferential rates. However, those public works loan boards rates in recent months have significantly increased anyway, so it's not such a favourable lending position than it previously would have been, where local authorities would have historically accessed funding at a couple of points below, sort of, based on those funding rates. So that is not an option available to the council at the moment.
Thank you for that clarification. John?
Yeah, I suppose I'm left a bit confused by what the intention of this paper is, because I get it that we want to focus on short-term improvement of delivery of affordable housing. And we've got 5 options here. One is status quo, do nothing. Next is enhanced partnership working with registered providers, get that. And then the next 3, deliver a small programme of direct delivery, set up a local housing company and set up a joint venture. I don't get the impression that there's any sort of commitment or strength of feeling on the part of the administration that it actually wants to go down any of those roads. And if you're going to have a strategy and it's long term, then you've got to start sometime. You've got to start now, presumably. And I'm sort of left wondering. Is there any sort of real intention behind those the 3 last options?
As I said, I think it's on a site-by-site basis. So, if we were to look at the last option in relation to delivering an in-house model, if we were to look at South Manydown, is that an option that we might consider in relation to the lead-in time that we may have for that? You know, so that is an option. What we're saying, we're not ruling anything out. You know, all of these options are a possibility, and it really depends on the site. You know, I think that's what we're saying. We need to be very flexible. We need to take a really flexible approach to this, and it's about how can we deliver affordable housing, and we're not going to rule anything out. It's about the quantum of socially rented or affordable housing that we can deliver. How best can we do that? And I think we just need to take that approach, and it really depends on those sites. And you know, and a lot of them are very complex and not going to be easy, but it's how can we do that moving forward.
Thank you, David. You wanted to come back?
Yeah. I want to almost repeat what John said, because again, coming back to what the response you gave, Laura, thanks for that. I'm left a little bit in the dark as well. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, that this is a paper that's coming and it's talking about options and these are possibilities, but there isn't enough detail for us to actually... I don't know what I'm being asked here. Note the report, there's a number of options. That's fine, because I appreciate that, because I still have a lot of questions. Land acquisition as a primary example. Okay, so if we're in a competitive housing market and we have our potential limitations in offering a profitable tenure mix, because that's what we want to do, how feasible is it really for the council to be able to secure lands for housing development without facing prohibitive costs? We're going to pay over the odds for the land against suppliers that can actually make a profit from it. These are the questions I have, where I'm just... I get what we're trying to do. I don't understand the papers, what I'm being asked for.
So I think in a nutshell, the paper is simply responding to the motion as it was put. It's not giving a this is the answer sheet. This is the exact sort of template that we're going to follow. The reason it's here tonight is because that motion was put and was asked for a report to be brought back. Now, the fact that it's probably raised as many questions as it sought to answer is I think par for the course. It goes with the territory, given the situation that we have with the housing market and delivery. So I'm not surprised at your discomfort with it, but I think it is what it is, and that's what we've sought to do, literally to address that initial premise in the motion around the council becoming a house builder. I think the paper is saying not quite as simple as that, but there are other ways of doing it, and this is the rationale for doing it.
And it's also, in relation to page 6, yeah, you are being asked to note. If you look at the recommendations, note the conclusions of the high-level broad options appraisal for alternative interventions, delivery models as set out in section 3 of the report, and the ability to select the most appropriate options as sites come forward, dependent on the scale, resource requirements and strategic nature for consideration. And then it goes on to say, notes that in the short term, a land availability assessment will be undertaken to proactively identify potential opportunities to expedite affordable housing delivery on council-owned sites. This includes the vital role the council can play in stimulating housing-led regeneration. And we haven't really talked about regeneration tonight, and I think regeneration will play a key role in the delivery of affordable or social rent moving forward.
Thank you. Well, I was going to get Sarah to come in to talk maybe about regeneration, but or we'll actually let David go first. And then, you go first, David.
No, it's just a quick one. Thank you, Laura. So we've been asked to note it. So what is going to happen if you decide to go down some of those various options? Are you coming back to this committee? Are you presenting papers back to us? Or do we get a chance to discuss every single one of the options before you go ahead with that?
No, we won't be coming back with every option. So, in the relation to the short term, it's about, driving that forward. But what we will do, I guess, with some of those, they will be cabinet decisions on those. So they will go through the process. But in relation to some of the much bigger papers that come forward, we've already said in relation to the risk, there'll be a requirement to come forward with those. But in relation to what we will be doing is working with, so if we identify a site in my ward, or say we deliver a site within your ward, we will be talking to you about the site, and we will be talking to members within that ward about their site and how we're going to bring that forward and what we're going to do. So there'll be detailed work going on with councillors in relation to those sites where we identify opportunities to develop.
Thank you. I wonder, Sarah, you could just sort of give us a few details on what is in the public domain on regeneration within the borough.
Yeah, well, obviously, you know, the provision of new homes across the borough is fundamental from a regeneration perspective. You know, and coming at it from building a better place. I think, you know, regeneration is that underlying thread here, isn't it? We're talking about the provision of new homes and more new affordable housing across the borough. So, of course, that underpins sort of any major sort of neighbourhood regeneration scheme that will be involved in here, whether that's directly or indirectly, sort of working with registered providers. I don't know that there's much more I can add to that, really, and as opposed to, you know, scheme specifics. It obviously the provision of new homes is fundamental to regenerating the borough, the right homes for the right people in the right places.
So there'll be more details coming out on regeneration. I know Winklebury's moving forward. I know Southampton, Buckskin, initially discussions are taking place, but things will move forward in the near future.
Yes, certainly. Obviously, you know, there's Vivid are working on a sort of a master plan and a regeneration of Winklebury. So there's a planning application coming forward to DC committee on that, which is looking to provide new affordable homes and community and health facilities. So, you know, that's an example of regeneration at play there, and how a key driver for that with the council land contribution has been to drive forward that delivery of affordable housing on that scheme. And then, you know, there will be opportunities to deliver regeneration in Buckskin and Southam, working with the registered providers in that area. And there will be communication shortly coming out to start that process and to listen and take residents on that regeneration journey.
Thank you, Sarah. Laura?
Regeneration is going to, you know, in relation to the housing strategy that's going to full council and went through cabinet this week, was it? This week? is a key part of that housing strategy. It is of this administration. It has the highest potential to do lots of things, really positive things. And we're talking about strategic regeneration, where we're looking at really big sites and what we can do. And then we're looking at this medium and small opportunities, as well as environmental regeneration. So regeneration is very much a part of this administration's priorities, and we're very much committed to it. And there will be potentials through regeneration to look at how we can deliver more accommodation. Every regeneration takes place, you see an increase in density in relation to numbers, not density, sorry, in relation to the numbers that we deliver. So in relation to my own ward, in relation to Oak Ridge Village, and also in relation to the two of the other sites that border the ward, in relation to Chapelgate, and also in relation to the New Horizon site, we saw an increase in the number of units that we delivered on those sites, and it makes, you know, it still doesn't mean that place is not a good place to live. It's a much better place than it was, but gives us an opportunity to increase the number of units of accommodation on that site. We were historically exceptionally, in relation to talking about the funding which was available, going back into the good old days, we were a swim with money, and we were able to do some amazing regeneration throughout the town, Bishop out right out into the sticks and all around the town. And if you look at what was achieved in Popley, and incredible regeneration. And so what we're saying is regeneration is high on our agenda. There's no money that follows from government at the moment, and it's very difficult to achieve in relation to that. But partners and are very supportive of this agenda, and we're going to drive it forward. And exciting things I believe will happen within this administration and working with our partners.
Thank you. Ken?
Thank you. Just a couple of things. Site selection, you've mentioned that. Can we ensure that every ward get their list, if there are lists within that? And then when we go for developing on our own land, we need to make sure that we get best consideration, because that is a financial risk that we need to make sure that that is covered off. I did like the regeneration world, and I think there is opportunities in Southam, Buckskin, Winklebury, to actually do increase the density. I don't have a problem with density numbers if we use land that's concrete at the moment, or garages at the moment, because you know there is missed opportunities if we don't use the land properly. And I think most of us would agree we'd rather see regeneration on brownfield areas than greenfields being used. So I'm very keen on all of those things, and therefore, while we've got the housing associations near us when they talk about their regeneration, I wonder, can you tease out of them how many more units we're going to be able to provide in these? Because I think it would be important that we can see a real benefit, not just in the delivery of a new home there, but actually the greenness of it, and how many more homes could be delivered on areas that are not very house friendly at the moment. So there's quite a lot of work to be done in that regeneration space, and I think, you know, for my own part, I don't have the knowledge yet to say, yeah, that's great, or that's good, or could that be improved that way. So I think there is quite a lot of things that we as a committee, but also as a council, would like to see what regeneration is bringing to the table, and why housing associations who have got lots of money are not getting on with it, pressing the accelerator on this. And if it's part of the planning process, then we need to find a quicker way through the planning process to deliver these better homes for our residents.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. A couple of points. As a council, and it's in the report, we have built on council-owned sites or worked with partners and disposed of sites to partners, and so there's been a regular pipeline of small sites that have been developed over the years. I suppose I'm not aware of sizable bits of land that the council owns that would be available for residential development that would actually make much of a difference. Of course, there is many down south, but we are 50-50 owners of many down south with Hampshire County Council, so they would have a say in this. I understand that the driver here is producing more affordable housing as quickly as possible. And one option that you could have considered but you haven't considered is something that's presumably in our control, given that we are in the process of bringing forward a new local plan, is you could change the percentage of affordable housing that has to be built from the current 40% to 50% or whatever. And I'm surprised that isn't in there. Of course, there are viability considerations to take into account, but would it be fair to say that could be an option that's not in here?
I think we do, the report makes a comment, the most efficient way of ensuring housing delivery in the short to medium term is to have an up-to-date local plan. And then that does flip over into the local plan policies, viability, etc., etc. So, yes, it's not specific, but I think it's implicit.
Also, in relation to, it's, I think that is a viability issue, and in relation to, like you talk about the climate at the moment and what's going on, I doubt that's, it's not viable to do that, and we have looked at that, in relation to local plans, so that isn't a viable option. So in relation to the work that's been going on, to increase density isn't viable to do that, and we couldn't do that within the local plan, so that wouldn't be an option for us.
Well, I suppose I'm rather surprised to hear that ruled out, because it needs to be looked at, and if you want to be bold and make a difference, then you surely would look at increasing the amount of affordable housing that developers have to build.
I think that is the starting point from the local plan review perspective, but it has to be tempered by viability evidence, and that's the process that's being gone through.
Thank you. We have no more speakers. I know I said right at the beginning we were going to concentrate on the beginning of the paper, but we seem to have gone all the way through the paper. I just wonder if there's any more comments or any more questions you'd like to ask Portfolio and the lead officers. Ken and David?
I'd hate to think you were double counting, but on Appendix 2, I see Brook House has been added twice. You know, it's just one of those things, but I think it affects the number at the bottom, and therefore it ought to be noted. Thank you.
Yep, well spotted, Ken. David.
Okay, Gary, so just tell me to shut up when my time's taken, because I do have questions on each of the sections. I thought we were still going through. Yeah, so I don't want to hog the space anyway, but so I'm going to ask my risk-based questions anyway. So, Kate, sorry to put you on the spot. Let's go back to the land one. Competitive housing market, potential limitations in offering a profitable tenure mix. How feasible is it for the council to secure lands for housing development without facing prohibitive costs? Section 2, page 12. Is it? Yeah, yeah. So, so this was the one where we're talking about effectively going into market and competing with industry to buy land and build houses. How feasible is it for us to secure those lands without facing prohibitive costs?
Yeah, I guess that will depend on the site at the time and what the market conditions are, but nothing could be progressed without a comprehensive risk assessment evaluation. So I think it's yes.
And because we've touched on the local plan, how does the direct delivery proposal align with the existing infrastructure requirements stated in the local plan, especially when direct delivery may not necessarily influence infrastructure provision? Laura?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that, so I can come back with a written question to you. Answer.
I have a couple more, but I'll tell you what, I'll finish off with just one of them. Considering UK Subsidy Control Act's requirements, considering the potential tax implications, considering the restricted access to the Public Works Loan Board, what's the worst case financial scenario for the council in pursuing these housing delivery models? Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's basically saying there are significant financial considerations that would need to be worked through. So I don't know whether is that the worst case, but there are significant issues. It's not straightforward, absolutely.
That would definitely need an answer before this council could do anything. And to Laura, that's what I mean. Would they come back to this committee?
Yeah, this is a scrutiny committee, so this isn't decision. So this will go through the cabinet process, you know. So no, it won't come back here, but we will have to make those decisions, and they are open to scrutiny. So if you want to bring that report here, you will bring that report here. But obviously there will be an enormous amount of work. We're not saying we're going on any of these. We're saying this is a range of options. This is a shopping basket of options. There may be other options as well that we consider and that we're looking at. But we're saying we're going to take a site-by-site approach, and we will consider these options to deliver affordable housing. At the same time, we've got the sites that are coming through in relation to the pipeline, and this is to help us to increase the supply of social and affordable housing. It's not going to, it's not going to be, enormous numbers in relation to what hasn't already been identified in relation to the local plan, but it's wherever can we are going to drive forward this delivery models on a site-by-site basis. And I think it's really exciting, and I think it's an opportunity, and we all want to see affordable housing. We want the register to go down. We don't want people waiting on that register, so the more that we can do, the better.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, just to clarify, I think, and Councillor James has expanded on that. Any of these options, if they were to be brought forward in any shape or form, would need a very robust business case, clearly articulating all of the risks associated with each method that was being proposed. And obviously there will be other council rules and procedures with regards to disposals of property, achieving best value valuations, etc. So, that's not to say none of the normal procedures and policies would need to be applied to that and come through the council and cabinet route.
Thank you. So if there's no more comments, we can go back to page 6. Recommendations to the committee that we endorse the conclusions set within sections 2.31 to 2.34. They're all very broad, aren't they? So
is it possible, I'm quite happy with what we've gone so far, but is it possible to ask that we get regular reports on the way things are moving forward? Obviously, if you're not a ward councillor, you won't necessarily know there's a particular site that's being considered. Maybe in the members' update that we know exactly what's happening, so we haven't got to wait for 6 months to get a report back, so we can see where things are moving along. I think we'd all like some reassurance that we are moving along as quickly as we can, and that's obviously going to be part of our role to make sure that things are delivered quickly. So we don't want to be raising that in 6 months' time. I think we might be wanting to ask those questions a bit earlier, if we could have that.
yeah, that was my thinking. Maybe in a year's time we could look at what the sort of executive has done following this report. I mean, we can scrutinise and maybe make some comments and look at ways we can improve that as well. But that was my initial thinking, listen to the debate going on tonight. But yeah, I'm sure we can. So is everybody happy with those recommendations? John?
Yeah, I don't see that they're recommendations. I
No.
just think we've got options.
We've got
all
options
we've
here.
got in front of is options. So if we're noting options, then that's fine.
I'm just reading what the paper says in front of me, and I just thought, well, yeah, they're options, aren't they? I mean, and the enhanced option is the one that they're going to look to do immediately, really, with a mapping exercise. So yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Gary. I mean, these are options. I'm not happy to endorse all of these options. I'm happy to note the paper that's come through. There's not enough detail in it for me to put my name supporting all this the strata stuff. I'm just uncomfortable still with the risk. So I won't be endorsing it, but I'm happy to note the report.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Yeah. Abdul?
Yeah, my understanding from the recommendation that we endorsing the key points around unmet housing needs and increasing new delivery of housing and basically the issues around housing opposed to the options and model. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, and I get a sense from everyone in the room that we sort of agree that there is a need to increase the number of affordable housing, and I don't think there is anything here referred to endorsing the options, while for the options it's more about noting the conclusions of each of the sections, so it's kind of for your information sort of thing.
Well done, Abdul. You should make a good chair, wouldn't you? So yes, I agree with that comments. Yeah. So we're noting the report and the contents of the report. Is everybody happy with that then? Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I think it would be good to know whether you do endorse the conclusion set out with 2.3 to 2.34. Do you agree with the conclusions set out in the early part of the report?
Whether they're facts, aren't they? So, yeah. It's an officer detailed report there, isn't it? Sort of saying where we are with the sort of the register and the affordability, the social rents and the affordable rents. So that's how it is, isn't it? So yeah.
As a member of EPH,
Yeah.
do you recognise there's a need for social housing?
That's not what that's not the conclusion. It's the conclusion that turning around and saying, as an example, that the best most expedient approach is to build social housing on council-owned land.
It's not saying that, is it? It's saying that's extremely difficult to do that, you know, and we haven't got the sort of grants at the moment to do that. It's just saying, I think we just say we note. I think we're going down a bit of a minefield here, aren't we? We just note the contents of the report, and we look forward to sort of things coming forward in the near future, as the sort of executive, the new cabinet develops their policies around this affordable social housing market. So is that happy note with that? Thank you. And now we got next item, item 6, review of the works programme. So, we have nothing on the agenda for the next meeting on the 2nd of November. I know you had a suggestion, Ken.
I think we had a look at the policies that are likely to be supporting Reg 18. They were amended, altered, either by groups or individuals. And I wonder, could we ask Jo to come back and just give us a very quick update on those policy changes that we were invited to give her before? Because I think it would be useful to know what policies are supporting the Reg 18. Thank you.
So yeah, we had a working party a few weeks ago, and we went through all our policies. And before it gets to Reg 18, it'd be useful for this committee to have a look, sort of the changes that we sort of recommended.
Can I suggest I take that back to Jo and double check? I'm just conscious there's quite a quick turnaround in terms of reports to get a report published for the 2nd of November EPH committee. But if it's a verbal update and it can be presented in another way and the committee are happy with that, then I'm sure that can be accommodated.
John?
Yeah, I wonder if it would be appropriate November or even January for an update on the town centre regeneration.
Yeah, we got that one.
Is it? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I do apologise. Didn't scroll down.
And we've got Basingstoke on that town centre regeneration in February.
Yeah. And what about the leisure park?
Leisure Park, CP.
Is it? Right. Okay.
So in January we have the annual monitoring reports coming to us and the local infrastructure delivery. So they were going to go to scrutiny, but we had a meeting last week with all the chairs and vice chairs of the various scrutiny committees, and it was agreed that we always used to have them, and it was taken away, and it's now coming back to us in January. So we will have something in January, and we'll try and get something for November. We speak to Jo about the draft policies. Any other suggestions? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, the town centre and Basingstoke and the annual monitoring report is a very substantial item. So, yeah. So, everybody's happy with that then? Yeah, thank you. Item 7, we have no exclusions of the press and the public, and no item 8, no confidential items. So that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much, members. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.